This is another podcast from Alpha Business Media. Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something, well, really crucial for millions in Nepal. But honestly, it holds lessons for farming everywhere. We've got a stack of sources here, reports, analyses, all digging into a core question for small and medium farmers in Nepal.
That question being technology. Do you stick with the familiar, the tractor, or maybe leapfrog to something like drones?
Exactly. And it's critical because, as these sources show, agriculture is, well, it's the backbone. Supports around 62% of households.
But here's the paradox. Despite all that effort, its slice of the economic pie, the GDP, has actually shrunk a lot, from over 36% down to maybe 23, 24% now.
Wow.
And the reports are clear. This isn't just other sectors booming. It points to a real productivity crisis inside agriculture itself.
Productivity crisis. Okay, what does that actually look like for you listening, the farmer on the ground, based on these sources?
Yeah, it paints a pretty tough picture. There are several things adding up. Labor productivity is often low because methods can still be very traditional, very manual.
Right.
Then there's the land. It's typically in small plots scattered around. About, 75% of households farm less than 1 hectare?
Makes scaling up using big machines really hard, I imagine.
Incredibly inefficient, yeah. Plus, you've got the usual challenges, sometimes spotty market access, maybe unreliable irrigation.
And layered on top of all that, there's this new, really acute problem, a labor shortage.
That's a huge one highlighted in the material. Lots of young people, especially men, migrating for work abroad.
Leaving farms shorthanded.
Severely, especially at critical times like planting or harvest. And it pushes up the cost of labor when you can find it, puts a massive burden on the women often left managing things.
And the result?
Tragically, fertile land just isn't getting farmed to its full potential. It's left fallow.
So, huge effort, declining economic return, the productivity paradox, as the sources call it. Farmers are really at a fork in the road, aren't they? Stick with the old ways or find a technology path forward.
And that's where these sources focus. Two very different paths. Traditional mechanization, think tractors, and this newer advanced precision farming with drones.
Which brings us to our goal for this deep dive. We're going to unpack what these sources say, availability, costs, practicalities, to help you, the farmer, figure out which path might fit your farm. It's more than just buying a machine, right? It's a real business choice.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating is just how different the economics are for the farmer between these two.
Okay, let's tackle the established route first. Tractors and mechanization. The tractor. It's long been that symbol of progress, hasn't it? Doing more, faster, less backbreaking work.
It has, and it's still very relevant. But the sources stress it's not as simple as just get a tractor. For most farmers in Nepal, it means one of two things, economically speaking. Either you take on the big cost and hassle of owning one, usually needing a loan, or you access it through renting, often via some kind of shared service.
Okay, let's look at ownership first, buying on credit.
Right. This is a major investment, a capital expenditure. The main place farmers turn for loans is the Agricultural Development Bank of Nepal, the ADBL.
And the cost varies. I see notes here about walk-behind tillers, maybe 50,000 up to 250,000 MPR.
Yeah, Nepalese rupees. And full tractors, like a Solus, start much higher, around 745,000 NPR, which is roughly, US $5,600. The point is, buying a full tractor with cash, pretty much impossible for most smallholders.
So loans are key. What are the terms like?
Well, the cost isn't just the price tag, it's a borrowing cost. ADBL has floating rates, currently around 9.08% a year. Or fixed rates for installment loans, maybe 10.65% per year.
So take that 745,000 MPR tractor at 10.65% over, say, 5 years.
Yeah.
What does that mean monthly?
You're looking at roughly 15,000 NPR a month, every single month. The big question you have to ask is, can my farm reliably generate enough extra income to cover that fixed payment month after month, year after year?
But isn't there government help? I read about the PMP project, Prime Minister's Agricultural Modernization Project, big budget, subsidies for mechanization, sometimes 50%.
There is help, yes. And that 50% subsidy sounds great on paper. But here's a really important detail, a potential catch that comes out in these sources.
Okay.
The data suggests these subsidies mainly go to organized groups, cooperatives, custom hiring centers, not usually to individual farmers working alone. And worse, some reports mention concerns about misuse or funds ending up with politically connected people, not necessarily the small farmers who need it most.
Wow, okay, that's huge. So even with subsidies existing, if you're an individual farmer outside a strong co-op, that ownership path, it might still be effectively blocked, or at least very hard to access fairly.
That seems to be the reality described, which naturally pushes many towards the alternative, renting.
The pay-per-use model,
Mm-hmm.
accessing equipment without the burden of ownership, often through these custom hiring centers or CHCs.
Exactly. The government and FAO are promoting these. The idea makes sense, especially with those small, scattered plots. A center owns the machines, tractors, tillers, and farmers rent them by the hour or day.
Makes expensive gear accessible.
That's the goal. PMAP and FAO are supporting their setup.
And the cost for the farmer, much lower entry point, I assume. Sources mention average tractor rentals around 440 MPR an hour.
Yeah, around there. There's also a Department of Roads benchmark, about 300 NTR an hour without fuel, giving some context. But for you, budgeting, that 440-ish rental rate is probably the number to think about.
What are the downsides to renting through a CHC?
Well, the sources point out potential issues. Sometimes there's a lack of clear guidelines leading to inefficiency. And crucially, it all depends on how well that cooperative or group running the CHC is managed. Meaning, if it's not well run, can you reliably get the tractor when you need it? During that critical short planting window, availability can be a problem.
Okay, so for traditional mechanization, tractors and tillers, the choice boils down to ownership, that's CapEx, right? High initial cost, debt risk, fixed payments, but you control the asset. Or rental, that's OpEx. Lower entry, flexible, no long-term risk, but you depend on the CHE.
And the current subsidy system seems to favor the CapEx group model, leaving individual farmers often facing full market rental rates.
Right, which perfectly sets up the contrast with the second path, drones.
A completely different approach.
It feels like a huge leap technologically, not just gears and engines, but precision, data, and a totally different economic model.
That's the key thing for the farmer. With drones, in this agricultural context, you're generally not thinking about owning the machine. You're buying a service. It's essentially farming as a service.
Why not ownership?
Cost, mainly. The sources put professional agricultural drones, like a 10-liter sprayer, at around 1.7 million NPR. That's nearly US $13,000. More advanced ones, $30,000, $40,000 plus. Clearly way out of reach for the average small farm.
Got it. So the service model makes it accessible. You pay for the job, the spraying, the monitoring.
Exactly. And the costs are predictable operating expenses. The sources quote spraying services between, say, 750 to 950 MPR per acre. That works out to maybe 1,875 to 2,375 MPR per hectare. You pay based on the area covered.
Okay, but let's compare costs directly. The sources had an example. Manual spraying costing around 3,700 MPR per hectare, all in. Drone service, maybe 3,645 NPR, including the service fee and savings on chemicals. That's only 55 NPR cheaper per hectare. Doesn't immediately sound like a revolution.
Ah, yes. And this is where you have to look beyond that simple sticker price comparison, that tiny direct saving. It's really just the tip of the iceberg. The sources stress the real economic punch comes from the indirect benefits.
Okay, like what? What are those bigger benefits?
Well, first, resource savings through precision. Drones apply chemicals much more accurately. Think 25–30% less pesticide or fertilizer used because it goes exactly where needed in the right dose.
Less waste.
And water. Huge savings there. Those fine mist nozzles mean drones use 80–90% less water compared to backpack spraying. Critical in water-scarce areas.
Okay, resource savings. What about time and labor, that big shortage issue?
This is where drones are truly dramatic. One drone can spray an acre in, 5 to 7 minutes?
5 minutes.
Compared to a person maybe doing 3 or 4 acres in a whole day manually. That speed isn't just convenient, it lets you treat the crop exactly when you need to, hitting that narrow window when it's most effective against a pest or disease.
Which could be the difference between saving a crop and losing it.
Precisely. Missing that window can lead to devastating losses. So timely, precise application doesn't just save a bit on labor cost, it protects your yield. The sources suggest drones can actually increase yields, potentially up to 20% through better crop health.
So it's risk management and potentially higher income, not just cost cutting.
Exactly. There's already research in Nepal using drones for things like estimating rice and wheat yields. It's tangible.
And these services are actually available now. It's not theoretical.
Oh yeah, the sources list licensed companies operating right now in Nepal. Matuka Drone Services, Geovation Nepal, Drone Hub Nepal. Others like DronePal, Airlift popping up. You can call them today and book a service.
So wrapping up the drone economics, it's OpEx, a pay-as-you-go service, manageable costs tied to the task, with potential for significant ROI from saving inputs, saving labor, and boosting yield. It bypasses that massive CapEx barrier of buying equipment.
Right, which leads to this idea of a technological leap for Nepal.
Explain that.
Well, Nepal's terrain, the small plots, the capital constraints, they've made that classic 20th century tractor-based mechanization journey slow and difficult. Drones, being terrain independent and accessed via service, offer a way to potentially jump straight to a 21st century model, flexible, data-driven, service-based agriculture.
Okay, so we have the tractor path ownership challenges, rental reliance, and the drone path high-tech service model. How does you, the farmer listening, actually decide? It's clearly not one size fits all. You need to be the farm manager here.
Absolutely. And the sources give us a good framework, basically four key things you need to analyze about your specific farm.
Number one.
Farm size and terrain.
Hmm.
Is your land relatively large and flat, like in the Terai? Maybe owning a walk-behind tiller you'll use a lot could make sense if you can manage the financing. Or are your fields small, scattered, terraced in the hills? Renting smaller gear or using drones might be the only practical options.
Makes sense.
Second factor, your main crops. Are you growing labor-intensive staples like rice, where saving tillage time is the biggest win? Or high-value crops, vegetables, spices, where precision spraying to save expensive chemicals, ensure quality, and nail the timing is more critical for profit? Your access to capital and cooperatives. Are you in a strong co-op that might actually get a PMP subsidy for equipment that could tilt the balance towards ownership for the group?
Right.
Or are you an individual with limited savings? Then pay-for-use renting drone services is likely far less risky and more realistic.
And finally, number four.
How bad is the labor shortage hitting you personally? If finding or affording help is your biggest problem, you need to compare. What does hired labor cost me versus renting a tiller or hiring a drone? Which stage of farming land prep, crop care is my biggest bottleneck? And which technology addresses that specific pain point most effectively?
Let's make this concrete with those comparisons from the sources. That walk-behind tiller buy versus rent. The key concept was the break-even point, right?
Yes. Based on their numbers, like 150,000 NPR tiller, 10.65% loan, 400 NPR hour rent, the calculation suggests a break-even somewhere around, say, 150 hours of use per year. Meaning if you calculate, you'll use it less than maybe 120 hours a year. Renting is almost certainly cheaper overall. You avoid the loan, interest, maintenance risk. But if you'll use it a lot more, maybe 150, 200 plus hours, large farm, maybe renting it out yourself, then ownership might start to look financially viable despite the hurdles. The question you must ask, how many hours, realistically?
Okay, now contrast that with the drone spraying calculation. We saw the direct saving was tiny, maybe 55 NPR per hectare.
Right. And this is where the manager thinking comes in again. Forget the 55 NPR for a second. Think about the value protected or gained. If that drone's timely, precise spraying prevents a pest outbreak that would have cut your yield by just 5%.
Okay.
On a hectare of vegetables worth, say, 50,000 NPR, that 5% loss is 2,500 NPR of income gone. So if the drone service costs less than 2,500 NPR, it didn't just save you 55 NPR directly. It potentially saved you thousands in lost revenue.
So the calculation needs to include prevented losses and potential yield increase, not just direct cost comparison. Plus the softer benefits, saving your own time, less chemical exposure.
Exactly. Especially vital for high-value crops. Drones offer a different kind of ROI productivity, quality, risk reduction.
So wrapping this all up, the big takeaway from the sources seems to be
no single best answer. It truly deeply depends on your farm's unique context.
But there's a clear trend emerging, especially for most small and medium farms dealing with limited capital and scattered land. The momentum seems to be shifting away from individual ownership of big, expensive machines
towards accessing technology through services. Whether that's a well-run CHC for renting a tiller or hiring a drone service for spraying, it's about access over ownership.
Because it turns that risky CapEx, buying the machine, into manageable OpEx, paying for the service when you need it.
Minimizes the farmer's financial exposure. And that's what fuels this potential technological leap for Nepal, skipping some of the old hurdles and embracing flexible service-based tech that fits the reality on the ground.
So the power is really in the hands of you, the farmer, acting like that savvy manager, analyzing your situation, land, crops, cash, labor, and calculating which path offers the best real economic benefit for your business.
That's the core message.
Okay, here's a final thought to leave you with. What if the future of profitable farming in Nepal isn't about owning the biggest tractor, but having the smartest access to the right services? Where technology is a tool delivered efficiently, maybe through co-ops or private providers, directly boosting your bottom line.
It's a future focused on increasing farm income, ensuring food security, and maybe, just maybe, turning agriculture back into that powerful economic engine for the country. Something to consider as you think about the next steps for your own farm.
That concludes this deep dive into tractors versus drones for Nepal's farmers. We hope this analysis helps you navigate these important choices ahead.